DJ Academics didn't just clap back at a critic this time. He basically walked into the room, flipped the whole table over, and told old media their press pass is officially worthless in 2026. And the wild part is, it's not even the yelling that matters. It's what he's accusing them of hiding in plain sight, while everybody's busy arguing about who's a real journalist. Because once you zoom out, this isn't a petty creator beef. This is a power struggle over who gets to decide what's true in hip-hop, who gets to frame the headlines, and who gets to quietly skip the follow-up when the first narrative stops being profitable. Rob Markman's response didn't land like a simple disagreement either. It landed like an indictment of Academics' entire method: clippers, engagement farming, truth as entertainment, and he basically painted Ac as the guy who doesn't want reporting, he wants a storyline that benefits him. Then Academics heard that and went straight to the nuclear option. Y'all don't do journalism, you do vibes. And here's the layered mystery that makes this messy. If old media is so ethical and so credentialed, why does the biggest stuff only get loud when the story's spicy and get quiet when the story gets corrected? And if new media is so for the people, why does it sometimes feel like the same manipulation just with a live chat and a donate button? Stay with me, because later in this video, I'm going to connect the one line Academics kept repeating, "What's the last story y'all broke?" to the real reason this war just escalated now, and why a follow-up headline is the rarest form of honesty in hip-hop media. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So here's what's happening and why the culture is split right down the middle. DJ Academics has been on a run for years as the loudest, most unavoidable face of the internet-era hip-hop news cycle. Love him or hate him, he's not a side character. He's a distribution channel. And in the past few days, a clip wave took off where Academics calls out traditional hip-hop media and specific names, including Rob Markman, basically asking why they aren't covering a story he believes is major, and more importantly, why they aren't covering what happens after the initial allegations. Rob Markman responds from a very different worldview. Rob comes from that "I worked in rooms with editors, I'm built off sourcing, I'm built off standards" lineage. And his tone is, Ac isn't asking for journalism, he's asking for validation. He's saying Academics knows how to manufacture momentum online and then act offended when professionals won't co-sign it. And Academics, being Academics, doesn't respond with a polite debate. He responds like a man who thinks the entire credential club is a cosplay. He starts drawing a bright line between what he calls real journalism, investigative work, digging, documents, original reporting, and what he thinks a lot of legacy hip-hop media has become: reposting, access-driven coverage, and carefully avoiding topics that might cost relationships. Now, why does this matter right now? Because hip-hop is in a weird moment. The genre's biggest stories aren't just music anymore. They're lawsuits, streaming manipulation allegations, label politics, brand partnerships, public perception wars, and social media campaigns that move faster than any newsroom can fact-check. And when the biggest stories live at that speed, the person with the microphone isn't just commentating, they're shaping what millions believe is real. So the core tension is simple but explosive. Is journalism a job title you earn through institutions, or is it an act, finding facts, checking facts, and telling the public, regardless of who signs your checks? And if both sides claim truth, why does it feel like the audience is the one getting played? Let's go step by step through what we can actually see in public, because the details in these clips are the whole story. First piece of surface evidence is Academics' original call-out energy, him pointing at a cluster of claims and paperwork talk circulating online, and basically saying, "Where are all the journalists now?" Whether you agree with his framing or not, that's a very specific accusation. He's not just mad they disagree with him, he's accusing them of selectively ignoring follow-up developments when the narrative flips. And that complaint hits a nerve, because we've all watched this movie before, right? The initial headline gets a week of chaos, the correction gets a whisper, and the audience is left with a permanent impression that never got updated. Second piece of surface evidence is Rob Markman's response clip itself, and the structure of it matters. Rob doesn't really try to out-yell Ac, he goes for character and method. He frames academics as someone who hires clippers, spreads moments, and creates a reality tunnel where whatever's best for his story gets amplified. And he also leans into a larger critique that the internet reward system isn't built to protect truth, it's built to reward virality. So Rob isn't just saying, I disagree with your facts. He's saying your entire machine is a manipulation engine. And I want you to catch something. Rob also implies that ACT doesn't actually need journalists because he has his own distribution network. That's not a small point. That's basically Rob saying, you're pretending you need us so you can dunk on us. Is that fair? Maybe, but it sets up the third piece of surface evidence because academics takes that and turns it into a bigger argument. Third piece of surface evidence is academics' response clip, where he goes at the word journalism itself. He starts drawing a distinction between a writer and an investigator, and he's essentially saying, don't flex credentials if you're not doing the work. Then he goes further and says the real investigative energy is happening on YouTube. Creators doing deep dives, reading documents, connecting dots, building full narratives, and getting rewarded by the audience directly instead of an editor. And this is where the clip becomes bigger than personalities. Academics starts using the internet's scoreboard, views, clicks, engagement as proof of legitimacy. He's saying the people chose us, and that's the most dangerous sentence in this whole conversation because popularity and accuracy are not the same thing. But in the algorithm era, popularity becomes authority. Does everybody understand how crazy that is? Then you get the moment where academics literally pulls up a definition of journalism on stream and argues that you don't need a degree to do the work. That's surface evidence too, because it tells you what battlefield he's choosing. He's not fighting over who has better taste. He's fighting over who gets to claim the word. And the fourth surface signal, and I'm saying signal, not proof, is how he frames the old guard as people who had corporate backing, had the barrier of entry advantage, and now they're trying to play catch-up in a space where the audience can opt out. That's the heart of his war language. It's not personal beef to him, it's an ecosystem shift. And when he says, what's the last story y'all broke, he's attacking the thing old media used to own, exclusivity. Now, before we move on, I need you to hold one uncomfortable question in your head. If academics is right that follow-ups get buried, what does that say about the incentives of the platforms and publications you rely on? And if Rob Markman is right that Ox Machine is built for engagement, what does that say about the truth you think you're consuming every day? And oh, do I have more, because the next layer of this is where it gets nasty, not in the he said, she said way, but in the entire culture is picking sides like it's a championship game way. And to the old media Avengers in the comments already warming up their keyboards, don't just tell me you hate academics, tell me what story you think got ignored when the narrative flipped. Because in the next part, I'm going to talk about how other major voices got pulled into this orbit. Charlemagne, Ray Daniels, the wider creator class, and why the loudest people defending journalism always seem to ignore the one thing the audience actually asked for: show the work. So once those clips started circulating, you immediately saw the cultural ecosystem do what it always does: pick teams, weaponize morality, and start rewriting history like everyone was laughing at the same mess 2 months ago. And that's not me doing the both sides cop-out. That's me telling you how the culture processes conflict. Hip-hop doesn't just debate ideas, it drafts you into factions. First cultural evidence piece is the way other media personalities and creators got name-checked in the conversation itself. When people start listing names, Charlemagne, Ray Daniels, Wino, YouTubers, podcasters, that's a sign this isn't a private disagreement. That's a public referendum on legitimacy. It's basically who counts. And once who counts becomes the debate, the audience starts treating platforms like gangs: old media versus new media, press pass versus subscriber count, degree versus Discord. Second cultural evidence piece is how the creator community gets used as both shield and sword. In the clip wave, academics frames YouTube deep divers as the ones doing investigative work, pointing to the idea that certain creators will read documents, compile timelines, and edit like it's a Netflix episode. And culturally, that resonates, because fans can feel when someone actually did homework.
The audience might not know a legal standard, but they know when you're winging it. But here's where nuance matters, and I'm going to say something a lot of people don't want to hear. Some deep dive content is genuinely rigorous, and some of it is just a longer version of the same rumor cycle with better editing. Both exist. So if you're going to crown YouTube as the real journalism, you also have to admit the downside. The incentive is still attention. A creator can be honest and still be tempted by the thumbnail that sells panic. That's not an accusation. That's the physics of the platform. Third cultural evidence piece is how quickly this turned into a moral referendum on personality instead of the original question. Rob Markman's critique leans into method and ethics, but the audience conversation quickly shifts to "Ak is disrespectful, Ak is toxic, old media is washed, old media is jealous, Ak is a necessary evil, Ak is a propaganda machine." And that's exactly how you know it hit a nerve. When the conversation becomes, "Do you like the guy?" it's because the deeper point is too uncomfortable. Your favorite source might not be incentivized to correct itself. And you could see that in the way fans debated numbers like it's a court ruling. People were saying, "Look at the views, that's the truth." And other people were saying, "Look at the credentials, that's the truth." But neither one of those is actually a truth test. Views are a popularity test. Credentials are an access test. And the culture is confusing access with accuracy and popularity with proof, depending on who they want to win that day. Does everybody see the game? Fourth cultural evidence piece is the meritocracy argument academics leans on, that the internet removed barriers and now the audience chooses. Culturally, that's a
Powerful story because it feels democratic. It feels like, finally, the gatekeepers can't keep us out. That's why people cheer it. But it also creates a weird side effect. It turns every conversation into a scoreboard obsession. Instead of what's true, it becomes who's up. And the counter-argument I can already hear is, okay, but old media does fact-checking and legal review. YouTubers don't. That's a fair point. That's real. Newsrooms have editors, lawyers, standards, and a long history of getting sued when they mess up, which forces a certain discipline. But here's where that argument collapses under its own weight. If those standards are so strong, why does hip-hop media so often feel like repost culture with better fonts? Why do we get 10 headlines on the allegation and one quiet update on the outcome? That's not legal review, that's incentive design. And here's another cultural reality: access. Hip-hop journalism has always been tangled with access. If your whole career depends on relationships with labels, PR teams, artist camps, and backstage passes, you're gonna have blind spots. Not because you're evil, but because the ecosystem punishes you for biting the hand that feeds you. So when academics call certain media paid narrative, whether you agree with the targets or not, he's tapping into a long-standing suspicion the audience already has. Now, at this point, the story can stay on the surface and just be "Ak hates old media hates Ak." But that's not the real story. The real story is what happens when the gatekeeping system collapses and everybody has to pretend they're not scared. And this is where we hit the pattern interrupt, because we're not really debating personalities anymore. We're debating the business model of truth. Here's the hard pivot. Journalism in hip-hop isn't just a craft, it's a revenue strategy. And in 2026, the platforms that pay you are the ones shaping what you call important. That's the part nobody wants to say out loud, because it makes everyone look compromised. Not just academics, not just Rob Markman, everybody. Systemic angle number one is incentives and distribution. Old media used to control scarcity. If you had a magazine spread, a big website homepage, a radio slot, you controlled attention because there weren't a million alternatives. That scarcity is gone. Now attention is abundant and fleeting, and distribution is algorithmic. That means the main skill isn't writing well, the main skill is packaging information into something the algorithm will carry. And that's why academics has power. He understands distribution. He understands that a clip is a weapon, a title is a weapon, a live reaction is a weapon. He understands speed. Old media often understands caution, and in a speed-based economy, caution looks like silence. So the audience interprets "we're waiting to verify" as "you're hiding," because the internet has already moved on. Systemic angle number 2 is access and liability. Traditional outlets have legal exposure, they have brand risk, they have advertisers, they have partnerships. When a story touches lawsuits, alleged misconduct, or powerful entities, the cost of being wrong is real. So they either don't touch it or they touch it in the safest, blandest way possible. Meanwhile, creators can couch everything in allegedly, talk for 2 hours, and monetize the whole storm. And yes, creators can still be sued, but the institutional risk calculus is different. So when academic says, "Why aren't you covering it?" a traditional outlet might hear, "Why aren't you stepping onto a legal landmine?" And when old media says, "You're manipulating," academics might hear, "Why aren't you respecting the system that used to control who got to speak?" They're talking past each other because their incentives are different. Now let's add the third layer that makes this even uglier: narrative maintenance. In hip-hop media, the first story often becomes the permanent story. The allegation becomes the brand stain. The first wave becomes the cultural memory. And the follow-up, dismissal, clarification, correction, nuance, doesn't travel as far because it's not as emotionally satisfying. Outrage is shareable. Resolution is boring. That's not a moral failing, it's how social platforms are designed. So when academics frames this as hypocrisy, "Y'all were loud at the start and quiet at the end," he's pointing to a real systemic pattern. But here's the part academics fans sometimes refuse to admit. His ecosystem benefits from the same dynamic. The clip that hits hardest is the clip that spreads. The calmer correction rarely trends. The war machine runs on emotion, not accuracy. And this is why old media versus new media is kind of a fake fight. It's a branding fight, because both are competing inside the same attention casino. One side sells legitimacy, the other sells authenticity, but both are selling something. Now, where does the journalism degree argument fit in? It's symbolic. It's not actually about education. It's about who gets to claim authority. Old media says authority comes from institutions, standards, and history. New media says authority comes from receipts, repetition, and audience trust. But the truth is, authority comes from distribution plus credibility. And credibility is getting harder to measure because the loudest voices can now look credible through sheer volume. So when academic says, "What's the last story you broke?" he's not just insulting writers. He's attacking the one currency old media used to own: being first, being definitive, being the record. And when Rob Markman criticizes academics' method, he's not just insulting a creator, he's trying to protect the meaning of journalism from becoming anything that gets views. Now here's the part that nobody wants to admit, and it's the reason this conflict feels like war. Hip-hop media is experiencing a legitimacy recession. Fans don't trust labels. Fans don't trust PR. Fans don't trust institutions. Fans barely trust artists. So whoever can look like the last honest voice wins. And that brings us to the promised destination: why the follow-up headline is rare, why the correction doesn't trend, and why this war escalated now. The truth bomb is this: this isn't really about DJ academics versus Rob Markman. This is about control of the culture's memory. Because if you control what gets amplified at the start of a story and you control what gets ignored at the end of a story, you control what the culture knows. You control who is permanently framed as guilty, corny, finished, compromised, or untouchable. You control which artist looks messy, which executive looks clean, which outlet looks responsible, and which creator looks reckless. That's not commentary anymore, that's power. And once you see that, academics' war talk makes more sense. He's not just demanding coverage, he's demanding that old media lose the privilege of selective silence. He's saying if you're going to be loud when it benefits a narrative, you better be just as loud when it corrects one. And if you think that's just ego, ask yourself, why does that request feel so threatening to some people? Now, to be clear, I'm not saying every outlet is corrupt, and I'm not saying every creator is honest.
I'm saying the system rewards selective storytelling, and that's why the most dangerous thing you can do in hip-hop media isn't drop an opinion. It's follow up with receipts when the hype is gone. So here's the real reveal hidden inside all the yelling. Old media doesn't just lose money when creators win. They lose the role of historian. They lose the ability to decide what becomes the official version. And new media doesn't just want views. It wants to replace the historian with itself. That's why both sides talk like this is existential, because it is. And once that's the frame, even the petty parts of the clips read differently. The disrespect, the credential flexing, the you're just a writer, the you hire clippers, the you don't do research. All of it is just a proxy war for a bigger question. Who gets to certify reality for hip-hop fans? And the consequences are catastrophic if the culture doesn't get smarter. Because if the only truth test is engagement, the best liar with the best packaging wins. And if the only truth test is credentials, the most connected person with the best access wins. Neither of those protects the audience. So what's the resolution? Who's the hero here? The hero isn't a single personality. The hero is the standard. The hero is the work. The hero is the person, outlet, or creator who can show you the receipts, correct themselves publicly, and still keep their audience without needing a smear campaign to survive. And yes, DJ Academics has a point when he says a lot of people coast on reposting. That critique is valid. If your entire output is look what happened on Instagram today, you're not doing journalism, you're doing a screenshot slideshow. And yes, Rob Markman has a point when he warns about manipulation by virality. Because if you can hire clippers, pick moments, and steer perception, you can manufacture a narrative without ever lying outright. You just omit context. But here's why I think the right person is still winning in the long run. The audience is getting harder to fool. Not perfectly, but noticeably. People ask for sources more than they used to. They demand follow-ups more than they used to. They can smell when a story is being dragged for content. And the creators who actually do the work, reading, verifying, updating, putting timestamps, showing documents, admitting uncertainty, they grow. Slowly sometimes, but they grow. And the outlets that adapt the right way, not by cosplaying as streamers, but by bringing real reporting into the creator format, they win too. Because the future isn't old media dies. The future is prove it. Prove it with receipts. Prove it with corrections. Prove it with transparency. Here's the contrast that sums up this whole saga in one sentence. Old media wants you to trust the badge, new media wants you to trust the vibe, but the culture should only trust the evidence. So if you're watching this and you feel tempted to pick a team, I'm telling you right now, don't pick a team, pick a standard. The minute you become a loyalist for a platform instead of a loyalist for truth, you become easy to manipulate. And everybody in this ecosystem is trying to manipulate something: attention, perception, careers, money. And that's why this war is bigger than Academics and Markman. It's a stress test for hip-hop's entire information system. Now for the future tease, because this is only the start. Once a fight like this breaks out publicly, it doesn't go back in the box. More creators are going to start naming names. More legacy people are going to start defending their credentials. And the next phase is going to be the ugliest phase, the credibility audits. People pulling up old clips, old relationships, old paid partnerships, old misses, old silent moments. The culture is going to start asking, okay, if you say you're about truth, show me your track record. So keep your eye on the next public moment where a big story flips, a correction, a dismissal, a walk back, a clarification, and watch who covers it with the same energy they covered the allegation. That's the real lie detector test, not who yells the loudest.
Not who has the most followers, who follows through when the algorithm stops clapping. If you want more on this, the next video you need to watch is the one where we break down the real business incentives behind access journalism in hip-hop, the quiet PR pipelines, the relationship economy, and why certain stories always get framed the same way, no matter who's telling them. Because once you see how the machine funds the narrative, you're going to understand why this academics versus old media war didn't start with an insult. It started with fear.